Welcome to Inaudible. My name is Jeremy Weiland, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan Masterson. On this podcast, we discuss the weird, beautiful channeled messages found in the archives of LL Research, an organization dedicated to sharing spiritual information with the world. You can find out more about LL Research at llresearch.org. The archives contain transcripts of messages from allegedly discarnate sources who claim to hail from an organization they call the Confederation of Planets in service to the infinite creator. Ryan and I will try to provide analysis and commentary on the philosophy described in these messages, identifying the common themes and grappling with the application of this information to our human lives. Thanks for joining us on this journey. How's it going, Ryan?
Fantastic. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm still munching on a snack here, but I partied a little hard last night, so I've been recovering all day, but I am doing good now. I'm doing well now, and I'm ready for you.
Well, as the kids would say these days, YOLO. You only live once.
And we are here to put that myth to rest.
You know what? Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Oi. We are potty training our 2-year-old, and he's been running around the house naked, because I guess when you're potty trained, you take the diaper off, and then when your kid has to go to the bathroom, there's just a quick pause, like, well, where's all this pee gonna go? So, and then you can take that opportunity to say, hey, here's the toilet. This is where we go now. But it's been fun. We've had a couple accidents, but it's a good reminder that, some things you got to learn from scratch. You got to start from scratch with some of these items, And
it's a very basic thing too, that you learn that will serve you through the rest of your life. I'm acting like it's a degree from Harvard or something, but it is a passport to greater understanding, not being able to, or not having to pee your pants all the time.
Not having to pee your pants, yes, is a little bit of
sort of a red ray issue, wouldn't you say? Red ray center.
Definitely red ray. Speaking of, I am excited for today. You and I were kind of struggling for what we wanted to talk about this episode. And for me, the issue stems from the fact that there is so much you can talk about. It's like, how do you narrow it down? But I had the thought this morning, I would love to get into the energy centers, because the same way we could boil down virtually every episode that we do and are going to do, we could boil it down to, or we could tie it back into the core theme of our incarnational experience. And that is, what lessons are we to learn in the search for greater love and understanding? And then on top of that, we discussed karma last week, and that adds a little bit of perspective on those lessons that we learn. And I think another fantastic layer to add on that is the energy centers. Yes.
Otherwise known as the chakras.
Otherwise known as the chakras, which I mispronounce as chakras sometimes in the Living Love and Light podcast. I apologize. But yes, the chakras, the energy centers, I absolutely love it. Because say you're going through a certain challenge, having this new vocabulary of the energy centers and the dynamics of each and kind of the meanings of each can help sort through, I think, some of the issues that you might be dealing with. At least personally. Of course, I always speak of my personal experience here, so take it with a grain of salt, friends. But I would love to hash some of this out with you, because I do believe you've been thinking about this stuff a little while longer than I have.
Puzzling over it a little while longer.
At least puzzling over it. And I will say that the energy centers and the chakras were very confusing to me. growing up in a Western culture, this is not something that is front and center. Whereas chakras, if you grew up in India, maybe this is a little bit, you learn about it. I'm completely spitballing. I don't know if that's actually true, but I think in Eastern cultures, this might have some commonality in spiritual life, whereas in Western culture, not so much. So hearing this in the raw contact, first of all, am I way off on that? I just completely kind of made that up. That's just my perception of how it is in the Western world versus the Eastern world. Am I way off base on there?
I don't think you're way off base.
But
I just don't know how much a modern India or a modern China or any of these other present countries where these philosophical and anatomical systems came from. I don't know. I honestly just don't know how much they relate to them anymore. It may be a lot, it may be a little. But the point that you were making was that you didn't have a basis for it in your own life. And I think in that respect, based on your upbringing and all that, and based in that respect, I think all of the listeners and us are on pretty much the same basis, I would imagine.
Yes. One of the challenges of the raw contact in and of itself is the uniqueness of the vocabulary, the novelty of the ideas. And then when you layer on this, the chakras, which is, known about, some people know about this stuff, other people don't. It just adds another layer of like, oh boy, I gotta dig into this one too, to try to understand what's being said. So, there's a lot here to cover. I doubt we're going to get very far, but I think we can take a good crack at it.
Yeah, we can give a nice introduction. We were talking before we started recording, and a thought occurred to me that talking about karma, catalyst, all this stuff, these are great ways of kind of like looking at your life from 30,000 feet as kind of like this thing, like looking at it from above and saying, okay, here's how everything kind of maps together. But the energy centers are where the rubber meets the road. That system of understanding how energy flows through you is much more in the moment. It's much more visceral and direct. And what the energy centers really are, from my point of view, from a functional perspective, is a way of dividing up experience into 7 kinds of flavors, scents, what have you. What if you could understand a given concept, a given idea in 7 different ways? What if you could see something in your life in 7 different ways? What it does is it provides you with an ability to understand, maybe not understand, but to give you a way to relate to why people see things so differently, why you can see things in a radically different way than you did before. And it provides a locus for where to go when we want to work directly with the energy of things versus going through the illusion to do it, right? Like, I'm not saying the chakras aren't part of the illusion, but like when we deal with catalyst and experience in our lives, we're dealing with it as like kind of like a constituted ego and individual. And we're not thinking about how the energy is necessarily flowing through us. We're just experiencing the result of that flowing. Mm-hmm. Getting into the energy centers, like maybe like, people who practice yoga talk about raising the Kundalini. They're raising the Kundalini through these energy centers. And it's because they are cooperating with this system of this basic network of energy in their bodies, they're able to accomplish particular states of consciousness that they might not be able to reproduce consistently. So it's got a lot of promise and potential, but what I'm trying to say is that it's a very visceral, direct, experiential part of this. It is, I think, a little bit less philosophical and a little bit more, you really, truly can go find this out yourself, listener. Like, you can go use meditation and concentrate on the areas of your body and see what your body tells you. Don't listen to 2 guys on the internet. See what your body tells you.
Or listen to us a lot, but then, still go out and double check and, sort it out yourself as well. But
I'll accept it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh boy, where to start? I mean, we could start at the very beginning, but maybe we should start with an overview. How about that? So let me do this. Let me run through my perspective of it, and then and then Jeremy can chime in or completely correct and redirect where needed. But essentially, as I understand it, we have imagined this. Well, you don't have to imagine. You can look down and you can see your chemical body, the physical body. But where the chemical body is a representation of our physical selves, or it is our physical selves, we also have an energy body that is, call it your spiritual self. And that spiritual body maybe is represented by or contains, a different spectrum of light, of color, of energy. And we could split it 7 ways. And these are the 7 energy centers. Each has a color, and it has another name, that ties into a location on your body. But we've got the red ray, which is the root chakra. We have the orange ray, which is the sacral chakra. Number 3 is the yellow ray energy center, which is the solar plexus. And then the 4th is the green ray, or the heart chakra. Number 5 is the blue ray, which is the throat chakra. Then we've got it's the indigo, correct? The indigo ray, which is the pineal gland, or the third eye. Yeah. And then finally, number 7, the violet ray chakra, which is at the top of your head. What do you call the crown chakra? That's what it is, the crown chakra.
Right.
And each of it's funny because, with these energy centers kind of tie in with the 7 densities of consciousness. Right now, if we're in the 3rd grade or level 3, and we are trying to learn the lessons of love and understanding, well, it kind of ties in with the yellow ray chakra, trying to move into the green heart ray chakra, or the green ray heart chakra. So that's an interesting little tidbit, but essentially each color and each chakra has, call it a purpose. Or I kind of think of it as a filter. It's like on one level, you're working through issues, or this one filter kind of catches things. And as you're able to sort through and balance those particular experiences, then the light or the energy filters up to the next level, and you can start working on that level. How am I doing so far? At least this is how I understand it.
That's pretty good.
Thanks, Jeremy. I just kind of came up with that.
The concept of filtering is particularly good. This is kind of the basic way that I think about relating to my energy centers. It is in these energy centers where we have the opportunity to reject parts of the Creator that we don't approve of. These parts of the Creator are expressed in different wavelengths. You could think of different vibrations of this all-encompassing white love and light that is always coming to us from the Creator, usually from below. We think of the energy as coming into our bodies through the red ray, and so it's not to be taken literally, I don't think. I think it's just a way of understanding the directionality of energy, to think of the energy as coming from the earth, coming from below, and entering us in the red ray chakra. And then as it moves through these different energy centers, it gets refracted. It gets, certain wavelengths might get blocked, right? Certain ideas and certain catalysts or certain biases that we might have might cause us to filter the energy in some way. This way that we filter this energy as it goes up our centers is part of the way that we form our own unique approach to life. Our unique personalities is how we sort of block certain things and allow other things through. That's sort of the sense. I'm not sure that I'm saying Confederation philosophy word for word, But over 20 years of reading through this stuff, that's the sense that I get, is that these are kind of the grand central stations for the basic ways that energy flows in this universe. And our participation in that flow of energy is through this system. And of course, it's not just along the spine going up from the root to the crown. There are also other energy centers, other like secondary and tertiary nodes that are all throughout our body that also relate with this. So it's not just right up your spine, it's all throughout your body. And yeah, it's just a way of understanding experience as an energetic phenomenon. Let's put it that way.
Sure. A thought that came to mind is when Hatan states, or any entity of the Confederation states, that, boy, you guys are weird with your wanting to name everything. And they say, we just look at someone and we can see their vibration, and, we just know what that entity or who that entity is. But it makes me think, if you think of your energy centers as light, and if you kind of conceptualize them as filters, I don't know if any of you guys did the experiment in elementary or middle school where you take flashlights and you put colored screens on them, and then you mix the green light with the red light and it creates a different, light color. I wonder if maybe that's kind of how it works, where you can see that energy moving through someone. And the different way that that energy is getting filtered through the various, energy centers or the various chakras, maybe that produces a very unique vibration, and you're just using the same 7 color mix of colors. It's kind of like every instrument you hear, every single note you hear, you can recognize if it's a piano or a guitar or a horn, even though it's using. Every sound you hear is just a collection of a certain set of harmonics, and like a what's called a sound envelope. The quickness of the sound attack and how does it decay. But it's all the same. It's all just air vibrating. It's just vibrating in different proportions that you're able to pick out what that instrument is. And wouldn't it be kind of neat if a part of the veil dropping as we move forther to this fourth density, that we are able to start to feel that or see that in another person, the way that they're vibrating and the kind of that aggregate color that they're putting off. That would be very cool.
Yeah, you're talking about like being certain about the experience that we already have, but we can't put our finger on it. Like why people might creep us out when we meet them, or we might just feel like an instant connection. Like a lot of that is all that the Confederation is offering us is this energetic model for how to understand these things, not to replace the understanding that we've already arrived at, but to augment it so that we can see more nuance in it. And we can, I'll use this word that I use all the time. It's more workable. If you have this way of understanding the network of energy and the way things relate to each other, then you can work with that and you can use it as a tool for, visualization. If you have like a certain issue in your life and you can narrow down what energy centers might be involved in that, now you can work on those energy centers, not just emotionally, not just intellectually, but also, in a manner of speaking, physically. You can tie your experience of being an embodied entity to the sensations of your body and the issues in your life, and it can all be part of one unity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's start combing through some of these. Let's begin with level 1, the red ray. And part of me ties this into Maslow's pyramid of the hierarchy of needs, where that base level of the pyramid is, what is it, food and shelter. It's the absolute necessities for life that you can't move on until you can establish those necessities. Well, the red ray is how would you call it? The pure requirements for existence, for being.
Nature, red in tooth and claw.
Nature.
It is the fundamental physical uh, uh, material nature of us. It's about survival. It's about reproduction. And there is a sense, those of Ra say that you cannot make a one-to-one mapping between the lessons involved in each of the densities of the octave and each of the functions or particular areas of interest of each of the energy centers, but there is some sort of vague correlation. So if we look at first density as a density in which, you are just trying to achieve awareness. That's your big lesson in first density, is getting to the point where you're even aware of anything. And you can think of when those of Ra talk about the different bodies that we have. And they speak of the red ray body as kind of like you as a collection of chemicals and elements. And like your basic ability to maintain cohesion as an entity rather than just a dissolute, thing. That is the red ray. So when we talk about these energy centers and rays, when I say red ray, I mean the red ray energy center, right? This is all, it's trying to understand experience as at these different levels. So when I say the red ray energy body or something like that, I'm just talking about the body understood at this level. There's 7 of them, and I'm trying to talk about one of them. That's all that I mean by that. I'm not trying to like obfuscate or hand wave or anything. But at that level, it's really about our love of life, that very visceral, vital need that we all have to be fully engaged in our life. So try to think of a feeling that you have that combines all of these concerns together, right? Like what is common amongst all these things? That vibration that maybe you can't put a finger on, but you can feel it when we talk about it, like the sense that connects all these subjects together. I consider that to be red ray. And I might be wrong, so you need to investigate this stuff for yourself. Just trying to get you started.
Yeah. For me, red ray is just about the pure base survival. All of those, call it reptilian brain, maybe not on the aggressive defensive stance, but as far as the, like the caveman must get food, like must hunt for food, must build shelter, find a cave. It's just the base. I need to be. And, a part of that, I know throughout, I'm going to reference a lot in this episode today, Carla Ruckert's book, Living the Law of One, 101, The Choice. I think it's a fantastic book, and roughly half the book is dedicated to discussing the energy ray centers. But she ties in with a lot of the energy centers, the sexual energy part of each of those centers. But, reproduction, just throw that in the mix of red ray. That is a very necessary part of, and I mean, it's not the emotional side of sex, but the pure biological reproductive side. That is a part of life. It's a part of the requirement for the propagation of species, right? Food, shelter, reproduction, base level.
So when we talk about the red ray and how it is this kind of like visceral, animalistic, vital, natural thing, we're not saying that every time that you experience in red ray that you're some sort of caveman. I'm referring to the resonances from lifetimes upon lifetimes upon lifetimes of going through the process of spiritual evolution, and how these different experiences kind of sort themselves into different aspects of feeling quality that we don't even have like really good words for. But if they are looked at as kind of a feeling tone, as something that's more of a vibration or a harmonic phenomenon, now we can kind of have a model for talking about them in a more full-fledged way that doesn't require us to, I don't know, that gives us like a paint to paint with rather than having to get everything very, very, very conscious and clear. That's really what it is. It's we're not talking about psychology per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is all the stuff that you can like, test and reproduce the results of psychological experiments. And what can we actually reproducibly and provably say about the psyche? We're getting into areas where it's very, very murky. It deals a lot with the unconscious. And therefore, we need a way of relating to it that doesn't require us to know everything. And these different energy centers give us different things to sort of like grab onto, so we can start to have a relation to our lives and our realities that doesn't have to go through this intellectual filter all the time, right?
That's a good way of putting it. That this just gives us something to hold on to, just something to, again, the way I put it is it's things that you already know become just a little bit more real and tangible when you articulate it. And, the somewhat of a tangent, but the movie Arrival, when the aliens land on Earth and they got to figure out how to talk to the aliens. One of the themes of that movie is just the power of language. And I think it's even said verbatim in the movie, at least it's brought up, that, a different vocabulary or a different language kind of gives you access to different ideas, because that's how we translate our thoughts into something that is a bit more real. So, yeah, hopefully this vocabulary, hopefully these ideas just provide something to hold on to a little bit,
Yes. And so if you can feel the unity between starving and needing to eat and not wanting to go to your job in the morning because you just hate life, right? And you're just completely depressed because your life is not what you want and you don't have any will to live it anymore. These are two aspects of Red Ray. It's that elan vital, right? It's that energy of life that is so basic. And like when you exercise, right? When you really tire yourself out and you feel your body firing and like everything working, like that's Red Ray. It's this visceral energy that's at the root of our manifest existence in this in this world that we participate in.
Yeah. Great point. I've even got a little paragraph here that was channeled on September 22nd, 1985 by an entity going by La Lima. And this is, I know, right? La Lima. That's an L/L-E-E-M-A for, Anyway, La Lima is talking about Red Ray and talking about despair. And La Lima states, when an entity is in possession of mental despair and has not moved from that dynamic into a productive mode of thinking, analyzing, feeling and acting, that despair becomes incorporated within the body complex. Thence comes disease and ultimately death. Therefore, the wages of continued despair are the death of the body. And Carla, again in her book, commenting upon this paragraph, she writes the following. When our adrenaline reaction is only induced by truly life-threatening emergencies, we are normally at rest in terms of our Red Ray survival instincts, and our Red Ray remains open. However, in the increasingly pressurized first world culture of which we are a part, that adrenaline reaction can become chronically half-triggered by stress, so that we are close to the fight or flight response on a daily basis. This is exhausting to our energy bodies and tends gradually to constrict the Red Ray. It wears down the spirit and induces a chronic, habitual state of mild depression, which insidiously robs us of our joy. When we do not wish to be here on earth, we contract around our discontent. That contraction squeezes the energy pipeline at the Red Ray level, sometimes to the point of complete blockage. She finishes up. The French have a phrase which is particularly particularly apt for describing the sheer exuberant love of life. Élan vital, or vital energy. When we love and enjoy our lives, our vital energy soars. The love light of the Creator flows freely through the person who is enjoying his life. And I love that in this paragraph, she mentions the exact words, Jeremy, that you just said. Again, I think that psychic connection's coming through a little bit stronger today.
Oh, where do you think I got it from? Come on.
Oh, boy. Yeah, so I think this is interesting, that tying this into the red ray, when she mentions, when you have adrenaline, imagine you're on a hike and you see a bear and you get a pop of adrenaline. That's red ray energy. You're experiencing the red ray, fight or flight, survival. You're not going to fight I hope you don't fight a bear. You're probably going to lose. That is red ray energy, right?
And that is healthy red ray energy, I'd point out too, because that instinct is very, very important. And it is your adrenaline system acting the way that it is exactly supposed to. The way that Carla put that is very apt, I think, because we often in third density as more abstracted entities who aren't so, on the one hand, connected to the Creator like animals and plants are, but on the other hand, only have that to go on, right? They only have that to go on. We have this whole like mind that we abuse and twist in knots. It's interesting to see how society has evolved to trigger these, primitive instincts in us. In a lot of ways, it's used as a means of control. I mean, sex is used the same way. So it's important as we get to understand ourselves and understand ourselves through this 7-part system, that we start to see that all issues can probably hit on a couple of different levels. And it's not about saying, well, that's a red ray issue or that's a blue ray issue. It's about saying, how is red ray working in this issue? How is orange ray? And trying to see that we can untangle the threads of our emotions and our lives by working on this more basic level. The other thing that I would say is a red ray blockage, like she said, is very, very serious because there is a sequence to the flow of energy through our systems. And when it is blocked at a lower level, that energy is not available at a higher level. You can't get it back until you unblock that center. So it's important to understand that not only that, but like many times the way that we take in reality, the way it discloses itself to our minds is sometimes in this very sequential way. Like we understand it, first of all, as a survival issue, right? And then we might understand it as like, well, where do I fit in on this? And then where do I fit in with society on this? And then, it's like we go through these different levels. So I thought you bringing up Maslow's hierarchy at the beginning was extremely appropriate because it does seem like we can't really get past any of these issues until, sorry, I'm completely thrown off.
It's okay. My wife came in. She gave me the baby monitor so I can.
That's good.
Check out my son.
Sorry
about that.
I was trying, but man, I got completely thrown off. All right.
Yeah. Well, I would say that you kept riffing on that, which is fantastic. But about halfway through, you mentioned something that, it made me think that there is, when you're on a hike and you run into a bear, that adrenaline you feel, that red ray energy, if we're going to focus on this, that is healthy. As you said, that is healthy. But as Carla writes, in our first world culture, we have created a culture, particular some careers, some jobs, whatever it is, we have created some experiences that essentially has that kind of adrenaline running as a part of your normal day.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think that running into a bear, at least the energy, principle level, the energy you feel when you run into that fight or flight response is healthy, if you've got that running 8 hours out of every single day, that is not healthy. Something happens inside yourself because it's not healthy, where you start to constrict or close off the flow of that energy. Maybe you become numb to it. Maybe, I think when they're talking about energy blockages, and this is still something I'm trying to sort through, but you constantly hear, oh, you're blocked at the red ray, or you need to unblock this, and I'm still trying to sort through it. But what resonates with me is that if you have a high-stress job where you constantly do have that fight or flight response going on, that you're blocking, maybe as a compensatory mechanism, you're blocking that natural flow of energy because it's just not healthy for your body to deal with 24/7.
You might be blocking it. It's hard to say, right?
I guess you're right.
You might also be overstimulating it, which is also a possibility here. And this kind of works against the metaphor we use to filtering, because it's like you can turn the filter to negative, like you're getting even more than you're putting in. And that doesn't really how filters work. So I will say the overstimulation thing is not something that I understand as thoroughly as I wish I did. The only thing is that, like, to understand that our balance with these energy centers is largely about them relative to each other energy center, and not simply about the energy center in some sort of isolated, putting it under a microscope analysis. And that's important to understand that we're teasing these parts of the system apart to better understand these unique feeling tones, these unique elements of the creator's expendable energy, but they're impossible to truly understand that way. They can only be felt as part of a system, because everything that we experience through all 7 chakras, not just one.
All right. So Carla brings out another part, or brings up another point with the red ray in this book. And again, she covers this. She covers the sexual and the sexual energy aspect, and I think all of the energy rays. And I didn't write down all of the quotes for the orange and the yellow, but I did like the one she wrote for the red ray here, and I'd like to read it. This is actually a quote. I think this is Kuo, April 9th, 1995. In the session, Kuo states, "The amount of sheer energy vibrating betwixt earth and physical vehicle is astounding. Yet it cannot be acknowledged and used nearly so well by one who is working upon upper chakras, unless that entity has the patience, the humility, and the determination to come into contact with that earth, that soil of self. For the sexual identity is as powerful and as unique a part of the individual spirit or soul as any other incarnationally expressed energy. This is the energy which creates a healthy mind or a healthy body, the energy that gives a primal, quote-unquote, yes to being. This is, moreover, as are all energies, a sacred energy, and the sexual intercourse is as the Eucharist of red ray, the holy communion of the body. This union recapitulates the oneness of earth and sky, the oneness of male and female, and the oneness of reaching and waiting." That's a great paragraph.
Absolutely.
Very poetically puts the power of sexuality, in that perspective.
And when they say the power of reaching and waiting, they're referring to the archetypal understanding of male and female that gets explored in Book 4 through the exploration of the tarot.
Which, again, we will have to put that on the episode docket, because that is, again, my Achilles heel. But I really want to dive into that.
Yeah. There's a mention in Raw Session 34 that talks about the red ray is seen as that which, being activated, is the basis for all that occurs in vibratory levels. It is kind of like that foundational ray, and that's why I said it's so problematic when it's blocked, because that is such a no to life, right? Like was being said earlier.
Yeah. So if you have, we're going to move on to the orange ray, I think, but if one thing I like about this system of thought, as far as the energy centers, the blockages, is that in my mind, I have to, if I'm ever having a problem, I can use this template to identify, which energy center this problem is happening in. And when I notice a problem there, say it's in yellow ray, which we'll get to. If I'm having a problem in yellow ray, the first thing I will do is check my orange ray and check my red ray to make sure those are in order. Because as we'll see, it's pretty hard to do, I think, anything in green ray, love of heart chakra, anything in green ray energy of love and understanding. If you've got problems in the orange ray, or God forbid, the red ray, if you, again, like Maslow's pyramid, you're not going to get anywhere near self-actualization if you don't have your food and shelter handled. And I know that there's not a complete corollary between this system, but it's a good, there's some connections there. So Jeremy, do you have anything you would like to add about the red ray before I keep trying to plow us forward here?
No. I think it's time to go forward. But yeah, that was well said. All
right. So the root chakra, or the red ray energy center, is level 1. And I think the Confederation states it's kind of like what they would call a readout chakra. It's, you can measure it and kind of get a sense of where you're at. It's not something I don't think you can really build upon or refine as you would the orange ray or the yellow ray or the green ray. What are your thoughts on that? Am I misunderstanding that?
I can't decide if you are or not. I think I know what you're referring to, which is that it's such a foundational ray, and it is tied in many cases to the violet ray, which is very much a readout. Like, you don't manipulate the violet ray through any thought or work. It simply is as it will be, as the result of the previous 6 chakras determine. Mm-hmm. Red ray does seem like it's, I don't know if you work with it the same way that you do the other chakras, but you could say that about any chakra. I don't know. I'm not sure. I for a long time thought that you couldn't be blocked in red ray. So I understand where you're coming from this, with this. I don't know what to tell you.
But you know what, where I have heard multiple times the violet, the crown chakra, is, dare I say, literally, it's hard to say this literally, but literally a readout, a readout of your other energy centers. I only mention that because in the book, in Living the Law of One, they also state that the red ray is something similar to the violet ray, where it is a readout. However, the concepts we just discussed with adrenaline and flight, creating blockages, if you experiencing it too much, if you start to close that off, it then follows that it is not necessarily a readout. Or if it is a readout, you can still have blockages in that entry point. But I do think of it as the entry point, like energy. That's where energy from the earth, from the universe, comes into your body, is through that root ray.
It is fundamental in at least one sense, that you can't block it anywhere before red ray. That's your first stab at the puppy, right? Like you can't get anything before that. So in a way, it is kind of like a always on kind of thing. In the same way that violet ray is kind of an always on kind of thing. It's just that, and I think that for most people, especially in the first world, like, we're not dealing with this energy very often. I think in more fraught situations that people can find themselves in, you would see this a lot more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, if the root ray, red ray energy, if the root chakra is number one, then the sacral chakra or the orange ray is number two. And the orange ray has to do with the self. And Ra states on February 22nd, 1981, the orange ray is that influence or vibratory pattern wherein the mind-body-spirit complex expresses its power on an individual basis. The orange ray is that influence or vibratory pattern wherein the mind-body-spirit complex expresses its power on an individual basis. And Carla follows up with that session with a quick note in her book. Again, the orange ray energies which we experience in our daily lives are all about loving ourselves and loving others. So whereas root chakra, I keep mixing up this word, root chakra, red ray energy is about pure being and pure survival. Yeah. The orange ray kicks it up a notch. It's not just about survival and experience and being, it's about me. Where do I fit in with that survival? How do I feel about myself? You know, it's also interesting that I didn't make this connection until reading this book. And perhaps, well, it's not just about me, but it's how I love others, or how do I feel about others? Perhaps because we're all one. They're other selves, as LL research likes to put it, other selves. So when it comes down to it, it's really about individuality and individuals. So what can you add to that, or where's your mind going, Jeremy?
Orange ray and yellow ray are the two that I was most dreading having to describe, because I think that the distinction between them can be very difficult for me to find.
I agree.
The sense that I get of orange ray is that it is dealing more on the one-to-one level, where it's you in interaction with one other person. That character of experience where you as an ego are occurring to the other person as an ego. As an ego, not as a member of a broader organization or of some affiliation, but just as a self. And it's also about how you feel about yourself as a self too.
Oh yes, and this is, you know what, I'm going to ignore for a minute, just because I haven't sorted through it. But orange ray for me is truly about me. I know they say how you feel about others, but when it comes down to it, it's like, we're going to get to it in yellow ray where others starting to come into play, but just the way I see it is how do I love myself? How do I feel about myself? Am I proud of myself? My work, it all comes down to me.
Right. And all I would say is that in coming up with that concept of yourself, that is that articulated at that personal, intimate level, that also constitutes a way that you present the self in a setting where that level of detail and nuance of yourself can be transmitted. Now that can't happen, necessarily at work when you're talking to all your workmates. It can't necessarily happen in society generally. In fact, we think of the concept of strangers as perhaps those who don't know us on that orange ray level as a self, as a unique self on that, but on orange ray, I think that's the kind of self that we're talking about. Does that make any sense? It's so hard to find words for.
It's tough. It's almost like, I was just thinking, because just to give you a little look ahead, listeners, the yellow ray is, at least according to Carla in her book, the yellow ray is not just about your relationship with larger groups, but more almost contractual relationships, like your relationship with your spouse and, just those closer relationships. So I wonder if the orange ray interaction with others is just a stepped down version of that.
That's the sense that I'm getting.
Yeah, it's not, maybe it's your interaction and your acceptance of others without necessarily the deep relationship and the catalyst that comes with that relationship with others.
Yeah, one way of saying it might be that if yellow ray is about where we fit in with the group entity, orange ray is about where we fit in with the individual entity, right? And that can have an interpersonal dynamic to it, right?
Sure.
Because who you think you are on an intimate level is very important to that one person that you choose to express that to at a given time. And that's a completely different energy than when you are walking down the street in a crowded city. Who is that person that you're expressing? That's a different person, right? Slightly different.
It is. Just going back a quick minute about me talking about if I'm having an issue, and then I'll do a quick check on my checklist of, do I need to back up a couple steps on the energy centers? Carla writes about the red ray checklist before moving on to orange. And she writes, we are able to clear the red ray chakra quickly and simply as we acknowledge our sexuality and affirm the appropriateness of our instinct for survival. While the red ray center needs to be checked daily to be sure that the energy body is open, still the checklist is short. Am I okay with being a sexual being? Am I okay with living on planet Earth? If yes and yes, then we can move on. So it sounds like if we were to take just your daily experience and you move one level past the absolute base, then you're into the orange ray.
That seems about right.
Quo, we're talking about, orange rays. Again, it's tough, but again, I just liken it to your relationship with yourself, your experience of yourself.
It's only tough because we have to talk about it on a podcast. Like if I could just beam this idea to y'all telepathically, it'd be a lot easier. But I have to say that in being forced to discuss this stuff, I have a renewed appreciation for orange ray. I do think it has something to do with the contrast between who are we in the group entity versus who are we when we're just us. And when we're just us in this intimate, personal way, there's a kind of relationship that we can have with the other that isn't the same relationship as the yellow ray. And I don't think I appreciated that way of expressing the vibration until talking with you. So listeners, I feel very, very out of my depth in a lot of ways talking about this because I just think it has so much feeling quality to it. And I'm not sure that, I'm the most in touch with my feelings of everybody out there. But I hope that you can at least appreciate that in talking with you about this. I'm learning more about it myself.
I'm going to read a quote here from Kuo about orange ray and others, but just to try to zero it in on how I view the orange ray from day to day is, am I being true to myself? I guess that's what I would boil it down to, is my relationship with me. Am I happy with me? Am I accepting of who I am? Am I truthful and honest about who I am? And dealing with other people's opinions of who I am is kind of a separate issue, but at its base level, have I done the work to understand me? And am I honest with myself? And I'll tell you a story. Here comes a story, friends.
Get my popcorn.
When I used to work in Boston as a personal trainer, and there was a company called Blank Label. They're a clothing company that would make bespoke clothing, like from scratch clothing for relatively wealthy. I guess it was higher end, so the target market was affluent individuals. And a part of their marketing strategy was to give personal trainers a few, call it coupons, for their personal training clients to buy a shirt, to buy a free shirt. And each of us got 3 of these things, And we were going to, keep one and then hand the other two out to some of our top clients to just try to get brand exposure for the brand. Now, Ryan was not being true to himself and was being a little selfish and like, why don't I just keep two of these? I'll give one of them away and I'll keep two of them. So, and from the get-go, I had this niggling feeling. I'm like, Ryan, don't be dumb. Why are you doing this? That's silly. Do what was asked. Anyway, the long story short is I ended up getting two, I got two shirts, ordered two shirts, but of course the company was tech savvy. They were tracking everything and they're like, hey, this dude just ordered two and they're using the coupon codes that we handed out to these personal trainers. So they reached out to me and they're like, dude, and that just completed the circuit right there. It just shocked me awake. And I'm like, Ryan, come on, dude. You knew from the beginning, that was a moment of clarity that it was like, okay, again, I go back to last episode. Whenever I feel guilty about something, whenever I feel negative or bad about something, it's often in a way where I'm acting in a way that is either untrue to myself or I'm stepping my toe off of that straight and narrow path, as the Confederation would call it. And this was just a perfect example. Selfish me, not being true to myself and just being selfish. Anyway, I ended up paying full price for these shirts, but it was just a painful lesson of like, okay, dude, don't do that,
But there's a difference between, great story, but there's a difference between feeling guilty because you broke a contract, right? You broke an agreement with someone else, and feeling guilty because you did something you can't stand behind.
Well, that's how it started.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's how it started. And in a way,
try to make an orange-yellow distinction.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
You see what I mean?
Oh, sure.
Like the way that you described that story communicated to me the orange ray aspect that you were feeling of it. There were other aspects involved too, but you focused on this one part of it. And this is the kind of thing that we're trying to get at with the energy centers, right?
Yes.
Is this way of understanding our experience in these kind of flavors or tones on the scale of life, right?
Yes.
And it's where we place our attention that where the note gets played.
Yes. And I think it is a great example of how all these interactions intertwine. And this was I guess a good example because there is a contractual side of it, but the base level of it, that first part of it was that orange ray center being like, hey buddy, you're being dishonest with yourself.
Yes.
And I could feel that. And as soon as they caught me, it escalated, and then it's almost think of it as a double whammy, because not only do I know I'm being dishonest with myself, they know I'm being dishonest with myself. And that just hits it even harder, so it was a good lesson. It was a good lesson with actually a very good resolution, which I will not get into, but it was a great resolution for me and for those I work with. It was,
let me guess. They made you do 100 push-ups.
Oh no, I basically owned it because, the manager of the gym also was alerted, and, but I took care of it all with the company before I went to the manager. And then I kind of broke down in front of my manager because I was just I felt so guilty, and it just didn't feel like me. It was shame. It was just so much shame of like, I can't believe I did that, so anyway. Moving on to how the orange ray may deal with others. Kuo states in February 19th, 2003, a key indeed is to see each entity within a relationship as a flower of a unique beauty, which is better beheld than trimmed or plucked. And Carla comments on Kuo's statement here, the Orange Ray Energy Center is not about abstractions. It is not about loving humankind. The Orange Ray Chakra works strictly with the way we use our personal power and expend our vital energy in our relationships with ourselves and with other people one at a time. The belly chakra is all about personal relationships. Okay. I could see that. I do like Kuo's note, it's better to see, a key indeed is to see each entity within a relationship as a flower of unique beauty, which is better beheld than trimmed or plucked. And I can see that as, do you see yourself as another unique flower or another flower with unique beauty? And better to be held than trimmed or plucked. I love that. It's just, hey, appreciate it for where it's at and what it is and what it's doing. There's no need to pull out your pocket knife and hack it off and take it home and watch it for a week and let it die. Just let it, and, take it for its beauty, where it's at. Can you accept it at its face value?
Well, it's a stark metaphor for the filtering that we were talking about.
How so?
I that's how I interpreted what Kuo was saying. Was that to appreciate the energy rather than turning into something that's more desirable for you, right?
Ooh.
Taking the whole experience rather than saying, "I'll take this part of it, but that no, you're staying behind."
Yes, it's a good point. That's a good point.
That might have misunderstood.
No,
but,
I mean, it's what does it mean for you? And as the Confederation always says, use your discernment, listeners. Take what resonates, forget the rest, which you will forget the rest because you forget things you don't care about. so
exactly.
Yeah, take what goes. But I'd say I don't want to try to be too. I don't want to try to be forcefully poetic, but I'm growing roses out in the front yard, and I love roses. I love the way they smell. I love the way they look. They're just so beautiful in the sunlight, especially those deep red ones. And you know what? Roses have thorns, and I love the juxtaposition of that beauty and that defense. Roses have thorns, and it's like it's a perfect being in and of itself, or at least I can accept it for what it is, or perhaps I can try to genetically engineer thornless roses. You can try to work your way around it, or you can just accept it for what it is. And I see that nice corollary between those personal relationships. You can build a relationship with someone and constantly try to change them into what you want them to be. But what kind of relationship is that going to be? The other person understands your intention, whether it's explicit or not. But those relationships where you have again, speaking from my own experience, the relationships I have when I am just accepting of the other person for who they are, and there's no judgment there, there's no intent to enhance or change or influence, those relationships are much more real. They're deeper than any other relationships I had in the past. And most of my relationships these days are like that because I'm just, that's just how I take people. But what is funny is that when you have those relationships where you accept others just as they are, as that unique, beautiful flower, the opportunity for influence is more natural and more powerful in those relationships than they are when you're trying to force it. That goes back to planting the seed. You just be pure, be who you are, and you might be able to plant that seed of love and understanding in the other person, but you can't do it through force.
It's very, very unreliable through force. Although, there are some people who are good at it,
They are, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like that. Once you appreciate someone, the situation becomes much more cooperative and a lot less like who's going to win this, right?
Good. That's a good way of putting it. There's one little section in her book, Living the Law of One, about orange ray distractions. And she references a Ra quote here from February 27th, 1981. Ra states, "In a negative sense, many of the gadgets among your peoples, that is, what you call your communication devices and other distractions, such as the less competitive games, may be seen to have the distortion of keeping the mind-body-spirit complex inactivated, so that yellow and orange ray activity is much weakened, thus carefully decreasing the possibility of eventual green ray activation. And Carla notes this passage. She writes, "Orange ray relationships are a substantial part of the grist for our metaphysical mills. It stands to reason that our mill grinds finely, and what gets chewed up in their work disturbs our feelings. For that reason, it is often uncomfortable to work within a relationship, either with ourselves or with another person. We do well with our Sunday manners on a first date or talking with a stranger. We can even keep the fiction of the role-playing going for several dates. Eventually, however, both parties in the relationship must get real and express themselves honestly, and catalyst ensues." And I love that. I love that because it's so true. And it's so true. I mean, I don't know how many relationships you've been in with others where you start off and you're kind of playing a role, you know, and sooner or later you can't play that role anymore because you're being dishonest to yourself, you know, or I can remember high school relationships where, I mean, you're in high school, right? And if you're in a long-term relationship when you're in high school, you both are going to grow and develop. And if I soon realized, you know, being 20 years old and in a relationship, I had to play the role of who I was when I was 17, even though I felt like a different person. But my girlfriend she loved the guy that was 17, you know, that when we had met, and that causes problems, you know? So
Yeah.
Anyway, I love this. I absolutely love this, especially when she says, catalyst ensues. And that's, yes.
I do think it's interesting when they talk about the distraction quality that orange ray can have. I think she might be talking about a lot of gamers. Right?
Yeah.
Like it is the way that like yourself, your personality can be explored and articulated through your interaction with games, devices, different things that aren't like other selves, that because they're human like you, they reflect you in that way, right?
Yes.
We get our reflection from other non-human things in a completely different way. And that's an exploration too. And if we get too attached to that, then it stands to reason that we're not looking at the reflection of ourselves that most reflects what we want to work on, right?
Yeah.
Like what we want to work on is the self that's reflected in my brother's eyes and my sister's eyes, not what Call of Duty's eyes says, right?
Yes. I would say from a man's perspective, from my perspective, relationships with women have always been the most catalytic, because I don't know how women relate to this, but for men, or at least for me, rejection is always, it's like the biggest fear a man has is rejection. Or not the biggest, but it's huge. It's a huge part of our lives. And in our culture, at least historically, it's kind of stereotypically, it's the man's job to try to initiate a relationship with a woman. You got to go hit on a woman. You got to get her number, and, you know, and a woman saying no is just scary because it makes you think, oh, am I not worthy? You know, there's so much catalyst that goes on with getting out and interacting with people and putting yourself out there and making yourself vulnerable to someone else's judgment. And I think today I'm going to sound like an old man talking about kids these days and their social media and, you know, their Tinder, where you can swipe left, or I don't know which way you swipe to figure out if someone else likes you, or, but the whole process is much different and the catalyst available to get to that end point of like, long-term relationship. It feels like the nature of that has changed. Perhaps due to the fact that there's so much fear and there's so much catalyst involved with the old school method.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Simon, I think I don't know if it's an interview. Simon Sinek does a great interview where he talks about the age of social media and today's, millennials, the millennial generation. I'll see if I can link it in the show notes, but it's absolutely fantastic. He puts it so well, just how things have changed a little bit and how kids these days don't necessarily need to go through those crazy awkward phases that used to be standard for the older generation, where we didn't have these new communication tools. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing here, but it just when we're talking about gamers, for example, and especially young boys and young men even, that can get locked into those types of relationships, because you can build relationships with others through that meeting point, but the nature of the relationship is a bit different, and might be a little less stressful, but I would argue not as rewarding. If you don't have to put in all that awkwardness and work, to get face to face with other people. But
yeah, it's almost like how much of an orange ray aspect does any of these relationships have? They can have more or less. And like, you can imagine, like, you're getting in the Call of Duty at the beginning, you're just playing one-on-one. That's, not going to have a lot of interpersonal orange ray stuff in it. It's going to be more personal orange ray stuff. Oh, I didn't beat that level. Oh, I didn't do it. You're either beating yourself up or congratulating yourself. And then you start getting other people involved. And then the orange ray aspect changes and expands. And, I just think it's important to recognize that these energy rays go through everything. And it's just about where we're putting our attention. And we're putting our attention at a place ostensibly because we think there's something to be gained from blocking out the rest of the rays and just looking at that one aspect. But the point isn't to stay on that aspect, or worse yet, to pigeonhole the entire experience as just being about that one aspect. The point is to eventually zoom out once you have the understanding that you need of that particular ray in the spectrum and look at the whole, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to keep saying that too.
That's fine.
Just reminding us to like zoom out, because it needs to be understood as a system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good check-in, good checkpoint.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Let's move on to yellow. But a quick recap. Red is level 1, basic experience, basic survival. Just the need to be. The
vitality of life, both in its ability to make the heartbeat and the ability to, get your blood going, right?
Yes. Orange ray. I'm still going to chalk it up to your relationship with yourself, in the understanding of yourself. And you can extend it out to your relationships with others, perhaps on a one-to-one basis. Because yellow ray gets into the larger relationships. At least as I first understood it, it was your relationship with groups and your position in groups, and it was around groups. Carla states that the yellow ray chakra deals with formalized relationships such as our birth families, our marriages, and our jobs. She also notes, certainly there are ideal, loving birth families, marriage families, and work families, but our particular families may not be among them. Just noting that this can be, the yellow ray family dynamic can certainly be challenging.
Yeah.
Kuo states, February 19th, 2003, Kuo states, in the yellow ray chakra, and I think this is pertaining to the yellow ray and family in particular, in the yellow ray chakra, the culture within which you now dwell is likely to bring to the conscious attention of each the overstimulations and desires for avoidance which are part of the relationships of the self. such as the family group of birth, the family group created by marriage, the group created by working for a living, and so forth. So we are dealing with groups here. Quote continues. The value of this system of learning, which is bound up in the concept of family, clan, and other groups, cannot be overestimated. It is in this direction that progressive concepts may open new ways of seeing that indeed strengthen and further open the yellow ray chakra in such a way as to improve the orientation towards the green ray energy center, and that tremendous shift of energy which may come as the heart opens. So I think this is the door, essentially, to the green ray, which is love. And again, from my perspective, we could talk about the higher levels, and we should and we will, but the focal point for me is that green ray, that love, that, the fourth density, love and understanding. And it feels like yellow ray is the door. So if we've got our red ray covered, we're existing, we're surviving, we're procreating, we are being. Then we move on to the orange ray. I am me. I love me. I'm okay with me. And I have other individuals that I also appreciate and love. Next level is the group. How's my family? How are my friends? How's my work? How is my church group? Whatever it is. It's that you're just taking that self and you're expanding it. And if and when you can let that energy flow freely through the yellow ray, solar plexus chakra, then you're well onto your way to the green ray. What are your thoughts so far, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's very instructive to ponder the distinction between the relationship that one has with oneself and those close people with whom one shares what you consider to be the true intimate self, and that self that is out and about in the world, where it is not necessary to have an intimate understanding of me to relate to. For example, going up to the newsstand and buying a magazine or candy bar, right? Like, the relationship that we have is one of self meeting self. It's creator meeting creator, but it just doesn't have all of the overlays of all of the detail that is me, even setting aside the subconscious and unknown stuff, just the stuff that I consider to be most privately and intimately me. In the world at large, I am more projecting a useful avatar for the other players to see, right? They don't need to get completely, they don't need to understand every single thing about my personality and where I come from. It's more that social personality that I've invented as a user interface for the world, right? This is my way that I connect into the matrix of the world. When I am dealing with myself in the dark of night, or I'm connecting to a close one where I can show those things that I would otherwise hide, that's a completely different vibration. And I am only hanging on this because I am struck by the challenge of trying to sync. I can describe these things all day. I've described them over and over on this podcast, but the feeling, the ability to sense this distinction and to sense it in your body is a completely different thing. And I really do feel like this conversation is helping me recognize how that oil and vinegar kind of separates, right? Like just where that distinct, because they can get mixed up. And they often do get mixed up. And in fact, I think a lot of the conflicts I've had in my life are really about the orange ray and the yellow ray being tangled up. They're about some sense of propriety that is detected, but it's also about a personal betrayal, right? And these things get all tangled up so that you can't tell what's yellow ray and what's red or orange ray, not because there's something important in and of itself of distinguishing these rays, but so you can untangle the emotions behind them, relate to them in a way that gets the messages that they're supposed to convey, right? The imbalances that they're pointing to, and work with them. That's the only reason why any of this matters, is so that these experiences can present themselves in a way that then we can sort of grab the reins and take control and start to do the work that balances these energy centers relative to each other, and that works with whatever blockages and overstimulations we discover in our meditation, in our scanning, in our clearing of our centers. So that we can like work with those things on an energetic level and not simply be working with them kind of like at a remove of not understanding that they're energetic at all and just having to kind of like muddle our way through. Mm-hmm. And we're still going to muddle our way through even when we're doing energy work, right?
Yeah.
But it's a way of maybe giving ourselves license to think more creatively and laterally about these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like meeting them head on and then trying to tackle them as problems, if we can see 7 aspects of them and understand some way of relating to them that untangles these aspects, then we have something a little bit more detailed to work with.
Yeah. I'm trying to tie all this back into what I understand is the main purpose for our current cycle of experience, as the Confederation would call it, and that is to learn the lessons of love.
Mm-hmm.
And moving this into the yellow ray energy center is good to think about, because if you can kind of sort through this, I think it's a bit easier to take this down a level to the orange ray. But think, if we're dealing with groups here, and you can separate groups into family and non-family. And you don't, like they say, you don't get to pick your family. You get to pick your friends, but you don't get to pick your family. But in principle, the process should be the same. If we're just talking about groups, your family is a group. The people at your job is a group. Maybe the people at your church is a group. The dynamic is different. You might feel like the stakes are higher, but in principle, you're dealing with that group. And I think especially with a lot of people, family dynamics can be so challenging. And if you can work through that, you can work through anything. But what does it mean to work through it? What does it mean to have to remove your blockages of the yellow ray? Let me read this really quickly, and then I would like to try to hammer through this, because I think if you're trying to find some applicability to these ideas, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? But Carla is talking about specifically family relationships. She says, sometimes such relationships can become toxic. Familiarity can become over-familiarity. We can take each other for granted. We can sometimes descend into enjoying petty grievances and indulging in chronic sniping. Within many families, whether at home, at work, or on the playing field, dynamics develop between the members of a family which include a habitual bullying or manipulation of one family member to another. Usually this bullying pattern develops unconsciously. The yellow ray energy center is blocked without our ever intending to lose polarity or fall off the enhanced capital G game board. So she's likening all groups to different families. Maybe you got your biological family and you got your work family, but it is interesting that, you see this a lot.
To me, it's the social self. It is the self that is for society. And, when Carla was first talking about how this relates to the family, I kind of felt like that maybe was against my understanding of the social self, because I'm like, well, I'm not the same person to my family that I am to the teller at the bank. But actually, I kind of am. To the extent that, when you're growing up with like two brothers, you're pretty much more or less the same personality to those brothers as you are to your friends at school, right? And like, who do you open up to? Who do you really like connect with? Your best friend, maybe on occasion your parents, if you have a really good relationship with them. But like, yeah, that yellow ray aspect of who you are, in the sense that it only makes sense in a group, right? That's the part of you that only has existence in the context of a group, and it is seen most clearly when those relationships are formal, because that gives it that quality of performativeness, right? Like, you are out there doing a function. You're not just being. You are in kind of like, you are a cog in the machine in a way, right? And like, that's a very limiting, dehumanizing way to talk about it. But there's also a sense in which that's true, right? Like, we are all part of this human social machine that has this way of, it has a mappable systemic nature to it. And where we fit in and how we feel about how we fit into that larger endeavor of society, and those smaller distillations of society called your job, your family, your meditation group, right? Like all of these different ways that we are ourselves, not simply because we're a self, but as a feature of being part of other selves involved, right? And I think what we're doing in Yellow Ray is that this is really where we start figuring out what it's like to be in a social memory complex. This is the first point at which we deal with other selves, where we have the ability to reflect and have self-awareness. So it's very important. That's why I think third density is so vital in the path to the creator. Of all of the densities, it's the shortest, it's the most intense, because it's here where we figure out how to fully be our full, intimate, unvarnished, complete selves, but not just to those people that we trust. We are learning how to drop our boundaries to even strangers.
It is,
and then that's what you need in order to be able to open up fully to the thoughts and feelings of everybody else. That social memory complexes in fourth density will events. It will be society taken to its logical conclusion, which is not what we're dealing with now in 2021. It's something that has a lot more potential to. I think we all at this point on planet Earth, I think we all recognize how much better, how much more connected, how much more efficiently and cleanly that we could be doing this human endeavor as a group. And I think fourth density is like what we sense as that potential that we could be doing. And we just have to get each of our individual nodes in that larger social matrix clearer and clearer, so that we can fulfill that role and we can, transmit that high voltage.
It's a kind of a good visual. We need to get our individual nodes and, spread out in the larger matrix. It's a good one. It's becoming clearer to me that yes, Yellow Ray is group oriented, group dynamics, where the orange ray is more individual in nature, not just the self, but other individuals, one-to-one. And because I think, as you've kind of alluded to, the group dynamic is different than the individual dynamic. And I've said this to you before. I love people. I love individuals. I have issues with groups, with people, because it's the herd mentality is often destructive. It's destructive. Candidly, I took a break from Twitter, and I got back on and realized that I think I always kind of knew this, but politically, my side of the fence, quote unquote, is just as crazy. Looking at it, they follow the same. They have the same foibles as the other side. Like, it's all the same, kind of. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. You're in the same pasture. It's one pasture. It's all craziness. And it's all group, and it's all, as we spoke before, it's fear. It's just getting constant clicks and the attention, because that's what generates more activity and more revenue, whatever it is. But I know that if I were to talk one-on-one with someone on any side of the fence, 99% of the time, you're going to have a great conversation.
Yep.
Because there's so much individual story. There's so much power and just cool anecdotes and things that go along with the individual. Mm-hmm. It's the group mindset that I have a problem with, that I'm still trying to work around. But, maybe it's so far the only fix I can find, the only way that I can stay sane in all this and not get too stressed, is just to recognize that groups are made up of individuals, and trying to recognize the individual in the group while trying to understand the group dynamic, but just recognize that there are individuals in here and they have their own hopes and fears and dreams, and they have everything. Everyone's the same with that same basic red ray, right? The orange ray gets a little muddied. The yellow ray can get crazy, but everyone's got that same base level,
I think that's why in disasters, people find that they can suddenly be there for each other in a way that they otherwise can't, because it moves down to that red ray level. And on that red ray level, there isn't ideology. There isn't, any concern, but just getting through this, right?
Yeah, nothing unites like a common enemy. Whether that be this Mount St. Helens up here blowing up in 1981, whether it be, the World Trade Centers getting blown to pieces. Nothing, isn't that, it's sad. It's inspiring in a way that people can come together. It's just unfortunate that we need an enemy to do so. We can't recognize the common humanity in everyone unless we have something to all be negative against.
Unless we have the catalyst, right? Like, we need some outside thing giving us the experience that then, over time and with practice and with unblocking our centers, we can call upon at will.
Yeah.
But we have to go through that first, and we have to learn it. And, in the same way that, like, red ray can make everything so much simpler. Orange ray can make things simpler too. If you're having a problem with someone, like in your study group or at work, and you say, can we just go get a drink and talk about this? And you become a different person at that point, right? And that other person becomes a different person at that point. I'm trying to find examples that tease out where it drops from a C sharp to a C, right? Where we cross that threshold between these bands of vibration and go from yellow ray to orange ray. And I do think that with yellow ray, we get into situations where often, if we could just talk one-on-one, it would make things better. But it's a scale problem, right? At the scale at which humanity is operating right now socially, that's not possible. We cannot be intimate with every single person we encounter who has an impact on us, right? And we have an impact on them.
Well, going back to Carla's note about distractions in the orange ray, I think social media is just a great example of it's been so positive in that people have been able to stay connected and reconnect. It's helped foment revolution in Egypt. It's the power of social media is incredible. But I think where it falls apart is that maybe it takes care of the yellow ray, but while cutting out the orange ray completely, because you don't get that one-on-one interpersonal face-to-face relationship. I think, I think I watched an interview. Someone was grilling Jordan Peterson about some like his hate mail or whatever. And they read like a letter that he received about one of his, I can't remember if it was one of his students, but someone basically wrote him a letter about he was a hateful person and whatnot. And the interviewer asked him to comment And he said that when he read the letter, he didn't hear a person. He heard an ideology. And that really stuck with me, because I think you can see that all the time when you hear group discussion, when you're on social media, and you can hear just the language that is being used, especially if it's a contentious issue. It tends not to be that person's opinions and feelings and fears. It's a regurgitation of the ideas that that person has heard from somewhere else, that they haven't done the work to earn that opinion, but it resonates, so they just kind of steal it and make it their own. The same stuff just gets repeated over and over again, and it doesn't seem like you're really communicating at that point, right? You've just got...
It is a ritual at that point, right?
Ooh.
We are all going through this ritualized interaction, and the energy's moving, right?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
The energy's moving, but like we're not getting anywhere with it because we're just reproducing our existing yellow ray selves.
Yeah.
That's the only reason to do any of this from any rational point of view is if it's going to change somebody in some way. And we always hold out that hope because, hey, look, I've been taking a break from Twitter, but man, I have learned some things about myself interacting on there. And the thing is that like, once you do drop down to that personal level, like you very quickly decide whether or not there's anything to be done there, but that so seldom happens. And I really do think social media kind of blurs the line between orange ray and yellow ray because they make people who would otherwise only be yellow ray addressable. There's a possibility of orange ray addressable in a way that like wasn't there before, but also both of those rays are only being addressed in very stilted and filtered ways, right? Yeah. Like DMing with someone on Twitter or having a private message conversation with someone on Facebook isn't that much different than dealing with them out on the public feed, right? Mm-hmm. Like but there's something different about it and there's something not different about it. And it's just this very stilted way to interact with people. But it also shows you maybe the distinctions between orange and yellow ray, maybe just not as brightly, right? Like a little dimmer orange and dimmer yellow ray.
It's good stuff to think about when you have a yellow ray facilitator like Facebook. I mean, it's kind of an orange ray facilitator, but when people only partake in the yellow ray aspect and kind of ignore the other stuff, well, then you've got either a blockage or you just have an absence of, and that's not going to help with the completeness of being,
Yeah. Like what is called for in my mind is the ability to achieve the vulnerability that we can get with orange ray, but at scale, right?
Ooh,
at the social scale. And I think sometimes you see people who have this ability to talk to millions of people as if they're talking to one person. And they have an ability to like deal with this energy in a way that in kind of an analogous way to the way we would deal with the energy in an interpersonal one-on-one relationship. They can deal with it on that not higher level, but like maybe more refined level of having to communicate and express an idea in a sense of their beingness through the social matrix, right? Through the society. That's a very, very for me, it seems like a very tough thing to do, but there are people who are able to do that. You see this in politicians and different, public functionaries of different kinds who are able maybe to channel the zeitgeist or the national or the city or whatever, that spirit, and like represent it. And like, that seems to me to be, I mean, that's something that I really, really want to be able to do, but because I'm interested in politics.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, it would be great to have that charisma and to have I think one thing I've learned at least in my career is that so many people are so uncertain of the way that they feel. You typically feel a certain way, but you're uncertain if it's quote unquote the right way to feel. You don't know if you're sane or not, and so many people are so easily convinced if another person just comes in completely confidently and talks, no, this is what it is. Because so many people are so questionable, like, I don't know, or I don't care. So if someone comes in with conviction, I think naturally we just think to ourselves, well, no one's going to talk with that kind of conviction unless they actually know, So it's just funny how many people fall into that boat. And unfortunately, I don't have it in me to talk with that level of conviction about so many things. But it would be nice to have that confidence and that, I don't know. I kind of place a stigma on people that like to be in the spotlight and talk with a lot of conviction, because personally, I just think it's so hard to do. The more you know about a subject, the more you realize you don't know about the subject. So whenever I hear someone talking with that amount of conviction, I'm like, yeah, you probably don't know what you're talking about.
Suspect. Very sus.
Yes. Totally.
I agree. But there are people I do know that like the ability to work with this social energy in a positive way is extremely needed right now. A way of being sincere and a real person, but being able to scale that so that we can all see that we have that in us. Somebody who can reflect that vibration, and then everybody who hears or sees that person feels that vibration in them, and they recognize something in themselves. That's what I think that pure positive yellow ray is going for, because then that's what sets the basis for being able to have true social memory.
Well, I know we could talk about this for probably days and still hash through. I'm sure after like 10 hours of discussion, we could probably come to some pretty good core principles. But unfortunately, we don't have 10 hours. So.
And the listener doesn't either.
The listener,
God, think about how excruciating that podcast would be.
We should provide some drinking game rules about whenever Ryan tells a story, take a shot, or when yeah, I'm sure that would.
Whenever Jeremy says it's an energetic phenomenon,
I like your hand wavy. I like when you say hand wavy. I love that visualization. But I think now is actually a good place to stop. Next week, I think we're going to prepare just a little bit more. Let's touch green ray, love, and beyond to the violet ray. And maybe we can do a quick recap or clarification on the lower energy centers, if you want to call them that. But I think it's a good place to wrap up for today.
Yeah. The important thing I'd leave the listener with is that these three lower centers are not the sexy centers for spiritual seekers. Spiritual seekers tend to want to get into the higher energy centers, to the heart, to the throat chakra where communication happens, and ultimately to the third eye, to the indigo ray. Those are where all of the mystical stuff happens. But because we have this understanding of the serial nature of how the energy flows through the centers, many seekers who focus on those higher centers forget the lower centers. The Confederation is constantly bringing this up, and that it is important to understand these much more grounded energy levels and make sure that we're not ignoring any messages that our greater selves are giving us through the feelings and the blockages and the overstimulations that we feel at those centers. If you want to help and if you want to be of service in this more refined spiritual way that I think all of us do, it's important to never stop being a human and never stop connecting with the fundament of our experience. It is only when you are connected to those first three centers on the level that everybody else is, that then you can take that higher truth, that higher energy, and truly manifest it into your lives and the lives of the people that are around you. If you cannot take this higher energy and bring it into manifestation for all to see and experience and learn from, then you're really just seeking for your own purposes, and that's fine, but that's not really the path that the Confederation likes to talk about. Buddhism is one of those disciplines that tends to isolate people from other selves and focus solely on a wisdom-based path that focuses on the higher chakras. And that can sometimes be the right path for somebody. I am not saying that it's wrong. I'm simply trying to point out that for the Confederation, they are charting a different course. They are charting a course that has us at once be spiritual and connected to our higher selves and connected to the Creator, but also connected to each other, connected to the world, connected to all the stupid stuff that goes on this planet, that whether we think it's stupid or smart, it's where we're at and it's where we can serve.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, because selfish me, I want my third eye open. Like whatever that is, I want that. But maybe before I get there, I want my heart open and I want to feel with that green ray, unconditional love and understanding. I want to experience that. But as I understand it, I'm not going to be able to get that feeling, that understanding, until I get a better handle on what's going on at the yellow ray and the orange ray. So for me, it feels like if I want that goal, like kind of like what you said, you're working on those higher levels, but can you really get there, what you're going for, until you handle what's going on below? I think that maybe is where the work actually needs to go in first, making sure you're all set with that red, orange, yellow, working your way into green before you can get that third eye open. So I'm glad you bring that up, because that is why I wanted to actually talk about this and kind of hash through this, is for that reason. How can I better work through those lower levels to slowly start opening up those higher levels?
Yeah. There's a quote that talks about this that I'd like to read from, if I can find it.
Well, yeah, there is plenty to cover, and I know we'll have a few good transcripts to read from. I'll have more from Carla's book covering, green ray and on. And I think there's going to be some good stuff covered next week.
Yeah, there's more to say, and I'll save it for then.
Yeah, lots more. And of course, you can do this for a lifetime and just keep getting more and more each month, each year out of it. So, gosh, a good conversation. I'm glad we kind of hashed through this. It's so complex, but I'm sure at its base level, it's so simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy to.
It's too simple to podcast about. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, listeners, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to next week where we'll discuss green ray and on. Jeremy, would you like to do the parting words?
Yes, and I just want to personally thank the listener for their patience with us. I think I in particular am a little fuzzy today, but these are topics that I really care about, and I promise I'm giving the best that I can. It's just so hard to talk about, but if you would do us this one favor, listener, and stay in the love and light. Thank you.